Well, welcome everybody to our Leadership Pipeline app, a brand new initiative of our church. And it's so great to have you beginning or continuing in your leadership development journey. I'm joined by our C3 Powerhouse Melbourne East location, Mr. Dan Frecker. Welcome, Dan.
Thanks, Pastor John. This is so exciting. We are passionate about leadership here at C3 Powerhouse. And Pastor John, I'd love to start by asking simply, what is a leadership pipeline?
Hey, awesome, Dan. Well, look, I think that it's great to acknowledge at the start that sometimes the phrase leadership pipeline can scare some people off. Sometimes just the phrase leadership can scare people off. I'm not a leader. I don't want to be a leader, because they have a mindset about leadership that I don't think is a Bible mindset. So firstly, leadership for me is really about a person who's committed to being a disciple maker. You're helping lead others to become fully surrendered, fully immersed followers of Jesus. So that's leadership. And then a pipeline, well, that kind of sounds quite corporate. It's a little bit like, we're a leadership factory. That's part of our dream for the decade. Well, I like this. I like us being front and center, that we want to develop leaders, and we want to have a pipeline's a system for developing leaders. Otherwise, it just happens ad hoc. Hopefully it happens. So a leadership pipeline is a strategic, thought through process of developing leaders. So that's what a leadership pipeline is. Brilliant.
I'd love to ask you, tell me why we need a leadership pipeline.
All right, let me take you back, Dan. We have needed one for a number of years, and this is the reason. When we were in our first probably 5-6 years of taking over the church, we had a season of explosive growth. Heaps of people were getting saved. Heaps of people were coming back to church who were backslidden, and you know, when you have lots of new people coming to church, they need caring for. They need groups to go to. That we need leaders of teams of kids and creche. And there's like, what we had is a really big need for mature leaders or people who could help make disciples, care for people, grow people, teach them the Bible. And so what we did at that point is, and it was a mistake, we had a number of people who'd been burned out from their other church experience before coming to our church. And out of that burnout or offense, we were just desperate for leaders. So we're like, okay, well, you went to a big church and you were once a leader, and we're desperate for leaders. So we put people into roles. But unfortunately, over time, we just put them into roles. We didn't develop them. We didn't help them heal. We were just so desperate. So I guess that need, so we wised up after a while and realized, okay, we better get better at developing leaders. And so we focused on things like our internship program, which is a leadership development strategy, things like Bible college, a range of leadership meetings that we would have, not specifically a pipeline per se. And so we had a consultant, one of the world's foremost church consultants, come and see us, Dr. Sam Chand. And I remember sitting right here at this table with Dr. Chand at the end of a day where he'd met with all of our team. Our church had grown really well, and we were in a good, healthy place. And he's giving us some advice on what we should do. And he said, you and Danielle over the next 12 months should carve out some time. He said, you've got great leaders, but if you really want to accelerate your impact in reaching people and making disciples, you need to be more strategic about the way you develop leaders. You prepare disciple makers. So he said, you should, over the next 12 months, carve out some time to develop a leadership pipeline that will work for you. He said, I can see what's working, the internship's working, and this is working. And so we're like, okay, sounds like a great idea. Fast forward to 12 months later, and we've got C3 responsibilities around Australia, and we hadn't carved out the time. And it was November, and I remember it distinctly. It was a Monday morning, and I'm praying, God, we need to do something about developing a leadership pipeline. We haven't carved one out. I talked to a friend, and he said, I know this guy in America who's got a great way, like a system, a strategic way of developing leaders, a leadership pipeline. Why don't you check him out? So I went and I set a Monday aside again here in this office to pray and say, God, help us to get really good at developing leaders. Help us. And I watched this guy and it just didn't resonate. But then I kind of was doing a bit of research and I came across this guy called Mac Lake.
Right.
And I watched a video of Max, and he was there for a leadership development. And as he introduced his concept of a leadership pipeline, I could feel his heart really aligned with the way that we think. A real people lover, real discipler of Jesus, wanted this to be biblical. And he described our church. It was unbelievable. He described, which is like a lot of churches. He described where so often one leader leaves, and rather than having a number of leaders pre-prepared on the bench ready to go, we start going, oh crap, come on, God, please give us a new leader, give us a new leader. And it was like he was reading our mail.
Right.
And so he, the point was there's a difference between leadership placement and leadership development. Leadership's placements, I've got a need, and unfortunately, probably through many churches have done this, but it happened for us as well. I've got a need. We don't really have someone ready, but this person's close. We'll throw them in the deep end and hope that they swim and don't sink.
Yeah, sink or swim moment.
Yeah. And not a great way to do leadership development. And so some people did swim, but other people, it hurt them. And that was my fault because we weren't really strategic at developing leaders. So I saw Mac. I'm like, man, you're reading my mail. I got in touch with him and we began to talk, and I talked to the board. Let's invest significantly in this. We paid for Mac to come out to Australia for a week. He came out to Australia, taught 30 of our team the basics, and it really began a rewiring of the way that we think about leadership development, a biblical way, the Jesus way, and developing a leadership pipeline. So we're a number of years along in that journey, and we've got a long time. We're going to be working at this for years for it to become the culture of our church.
I love the heart of the leadership pipeline. I just love so much what you're sharing there. And it actually, the heart behind it really for us is our vision, is it? It's to see lives transformed and 100%. The difference between leadership, placement and development. We want to be a church that develop leaders.
Right.
I'd love to ask you a question.
For many people, the developing and the discipling is how their life is transformed. It's not just I've become a Christian and now I've become like Jesus in the sense of I don't sin anymore and I'm going to heaven and my relationships are kind of good now. Not just that, but it's also, now I'm actually wanting to help other people. I want to be a disciple maker. And so leadership development is helping people, and many people don't think they can be, but it's helping people become brilliant disciple makers. So that's part of the big picture, is transform lives.
Amen. Oh, I love it. I'd love to ask you a question, Pastor John. As you said earlier, the word leader can be for some people, a bit of a trigger point. But I want to ask you, are leaders born or are leaders made? Hey,
really, really great question. I think, there's different schools of thought of this. I think the Bible talks about the gift of leadership. So I do think some people are born with a wiring for leadership, and they become the school captain, they become the sports captain, they become they just, wherever they are, they kind of take charge, or they lead, or they become influential. And that's part of the Father's gifting and wiring in some people. That's the gift of leadership.
Yeah.
But I believe that many people, and the majority of people actually who don't have that gift, can become great leaders through training, through developing, through discipling. In fact, that's one of the things I love about Mac Lake, who's helped us with this. Mac talks about being the shyest kid in school. He talks about not having leadership, but he became a learned leader. And probably, if I reflect on my own journey, Dan, because I do have a gift of leadership, that's part of my wiring. It's always kind of been there. The mistake that I've made around leadership development in the past is thinking that's how everybody is.
Right.
Therefore, the way that I've grown and learned is I'm an intuitive leader. Therefore, it's kind of leadership's in me and I want to get it out. So I observe leaders. I ask questions. It's an intuitive thing for me. I read leadership books. I study it, and then I apply it myself. So I'm kind of, that's the way I've become a leader. My mistake is then going, that's how everybody becomes a leader. But the reality is it's only a small percentage of people with the natural gift of leadership. The majority of people actually learn leadership. And that's why a pipeline's so important, because we're going, you might not feel like a leader. You might never have been school captain, school prefect. You might have struggled to lead your 3 brothers in the backyard football, whatever. But you can become a great leader, and in that sense, influencer, disciple maker for the sake of the kingdom of God, by learning things that we can teach and train you with.
Powerful. And I love what you've been sharing about the word leader and disciple maker. They're actually one and the same. And sometimes that perception of what is a leader, to me, a leader is a disciple maker.
Yes.
And every believer, whether you have a leadership gift or not, we're all called to be disciple makers.
Exactly. A leader doesn't mean you're going to have the microphone. So let's distinguish between a leader and someone who's a preacher, or a leader and someone who's a teacher, or a leader or someone who, so a lot of people are like, don't put me up in front of everybody. Yeah. Well, that's not the goal. We're not wanting everybody to become preachers. We want you to, with your personality and your strengths, get better at leading or influencing others to become more like Christ.
Love that. I'd love to ask you, Pastor John, what is it about the way we do the leadership pipeline that really excites you?
Really good. This is the thing that, as I looked at, and there are, the idea of a leadership pipeline in different churches or organizations will mean different things to different people. But the way that we've interpreted it, the way that we've adopted, that excites me is this. I think that the way we're doing it, it is the way that, I call it the Jesus way of discipling and developing leaders. When you study Jesus, he was the ultimate disciple maker and the ultimate leadership developer. In 3 years, he developed 12 core leaders plus a whole group of others who then he left and they changed the world. So he developed leaders, as well as ministering to the masses. He developed leaders, and that's about multiplication. So if you look at what Jesus did, this is what appeals to me about the way we do it. There's 3 things. Number 1, it was deeply relational. It was in small group settings, with laughter, with hospitality, soul to soul. It was deeply relational. And that's what our leadership pipeline is. It's deeply relational. Number 2, it was values-based. So it was about mindsets. It was about changing the way that people thought, the way that they interpreted scripture. So it was really about the heart. And that's, again, what I love about the way we develop leaders here, is we're focusing in a soul-to-soul relational environment, but we're getting to heart issues. It's discipling people, not just developing, but discipling people. And then the third thing about it is that it is competency or skill-based. So if you're going to be a connect group leader, a small group leader, there's some skills that you need to create an atmosphere that gets people discussing stuff. There's a skill that you need if you're a team leader to help delegate and motivate people to do things. And these are skills or competencies that you can learn. And the Jesus way of doing that was, I'm going to teach you how to pray for the sick. Watch me.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to so you shadow me. Now I'm going to give you the authority and you do it. And then come back and tell me how you went, and I'll debrief with you. So it's watch me, and then I'll watch you. Come into the room with me when I pray for this girl to be raised from the dead. Spend time. So it's together. It's like, I guess, the modern version is an apprenticing model. And that's what I love about this. It's not a classroom only model. It's a relational, values-based, competency or skills-based. So that's what I love about it. I think where we've tried to do leadership development in the past has been more come to the classroom, listen to someone talk for an hour, and you'll go and be a great leader. But that's not how most of us learn. Most of us learn an intimate setting where we're discussing, we're talking, we're watching, we're doing, we're reflecting, we're getting coached. And that's what I love about the leadership pipeline that we've developed, that we've adopted and have developed.
Yeah, and it's exciting. I love that phrase. This is the Jesus way, how Jesus developed leaders. And that's soul to soul. It's relational. And Jesus did that, didn't he? He did life with his disciples. It wasn't, It wasn't, hey, sit down and listen. It's like, let's go together.
Yeah.
And it is very exciting.
They sat and heard him preach. They watched him minister. So he did the macro things, but then there was the behind the scenes development. And that's what our leadership development's about.
It's beautiful. Well, the whole idea of a leadership pipeline is there's different layers, or another way of putting it, different levels of leadership. And I'd just love for you to speak into that, Pastor John.
Okay, great. First of all, let's get very clear that we're not about climbing a hierarchy of importance or value. Okay.
True.
So before Jesus, whether you're the senior minister in a church or whether you're a new member of the church, whether you're on the A team in the church, everyone is of equal value before God. We're brothers and sisters in Christ. So the idea of having layers, if you like, or levels of leadership, it's not about value. Really important to get clear.
Yes.
However, there are different levels of responsibility that a person will have. When Jethro spoke to Moses, he said, the burden's too great for you. So you appoint leaders over 10s, leaders over 50s, leaders over 100, leaders over 1,000. And that was speaking to their capacity for overseeing people. So he identified layers or levels of leadership. So the idea of a leadership pipeline is that I love this, that the deeper you go into your leadership journey, the more people you're responsible for, the more you're serving, the more you're leading for God. So I love the idea that we're not climbing a ladder. We're going deeper into a leadership journey that brings greater spiritual pressure, greater responsibility, greater privilege, but ultimately it's to serve more people. So we basically have some levels, if you like. And when you're developing a leadership culture, it's really important that we have language that's consistent across the church, So no sense saying that a leader of 10 people in a small group is called a leader, but someone who leads 10 people in kids' church is a captain. And then someone over in the A team that leads 10 people, well, they're a sergeant. There's just no sense having different language because it's confusing. So we've simplified the language across the church. So you're either going to be a member of a group or a team, or you're going to be a team leader or a group leader, which is mostly leading about 10 people. Or you're going to, as you go deeper, you're going to be a coach so you might be coaching for team leaders, or you might be coaching for group leaders. So that's another layer. Or you're a director of a ministry. So you're directing the coaches and the leaders and the members of that ministry, which could be the worship ministry, the youth ministry, the first impressions ministry, the service production ministry. We've got up to a dozen in our church of ministries. That's a director. You could be a location pastor Dan, overseeing a number of directors, or part of a leadership team, or you could be the senior pastor responsible for all of those things. And that's the idea that there are layers. You go deeper, and at every layer, and not everyone's called to different to become coaches. Not everyone's got the grace of God on them for that. So we're not trying to force everybody there, but pretty much at every deeper level of leadership, you're going to need to use your time differently. You're going to have greater levels of spiritual warfare. You're going to need different competencies. So to coach leaders is different to being a group leader. You need to be able to give feedback really well. There's a range of things you need to be able to do. So there's new levels of competency with every layer that you go deeper in the leadership pipeline.
Amazing. And you shared before the power of having language the same across every location and across every team. So I'd love to ask you, as we come to a close here, of how do we develop leaders here at C3 Powerhouse?
Great. Okay, so we've simplified it down to this, and language is, like you say, Dan, language is really important. So we prepare people for leadership, not throw them in the deep end. We prepare them for leadership through apprenticing.
Great.
And for deeper down into the app, you'll see what apprenticing is really like. But it's essentially People get to shadow someone in a leadership role, watch them, watch how they do it, and then get to meet in smaller apprenticing meetings where we're going through competencies and discussing those things. And I love this about it. It's not a classroom with 30 people. It's between 3 and 5 people meeting at any place. It could be on Zoom. It could be at 6:30 in the morning, any time and any pace. So it might take some people 6 months. Other people, they could get through it in 8 or 10 weeks. So other people, it's just the appropriate pace that a person's learning at. So we prepare leaders. We prepare leaders through apprenticing. The next one is we equip leaders through huddles. And this is where we get all the group, so it might be the men's group leaders together, and it might be every, on a regular occasion, every couple of months, and sit down and we talk about how's your group leading, how's your group going, what challenges are you facing, how can I learn off you? Let's watch a little video together and just to discuss it and refresh ourselves in the skills involved in being a group leader. So we do that right across the church for every layer of leadership. We have regular huddles. And then the last one is we invest in leaders through continuous coaching conversations. And as a church, we have really intentionalized coaching. The world's greatest sports people have coaches. So I reckon probably all of us need someone to give us feedback. Feedback is the champion of the breakfast of champions. I get that right? Feedback is the breakfast of champions. So just the idea that this is what you're doing really well. Man, you're doing so awesome. And so it's mostly encouragement. And hey, what do you think? What would be one thing you could do better? Yeah, I noticed that too. Or hey, you might not be aware, but in your group, you spoke for 2.5 hours and people were falling asleep. So let's talk a little bit about that. So just that kind of just coaching. We all get better through coaching. So if you're going to be a developing leader, that's what we do. We prepare leaders through apprenticing, we equip them through huddles, and we invest through continuous coaching conversations.
And I would say as a leader, Pastor John, the one way I have grown is through coaching conversations and feedback. I love that we lean into that as a church. Well, hey, before I close today, any closing thoughts from you, Pastor John?
No, look, Dan, great conversation. I just want to welcome you. For those of you who are watching on the Leadership Pipeline app, some of you've been in the leadership game for years and you're upskilling. Some of you are just starting out. I want to tell you, you can do it. You've got what it takes to be a great disciple maker, a great leader of people. So welcome. We love you and we're excited for all that God's going to do in your life and other people's lives as we lean into this journey.